The soup smelled like heaven wrapped in steam, and Kendra Jameson knew the man behind those iron bars could probably smell it too as she approached. The shabby jailhouse on that humid August evening in 1876. She had watched them drag him into town 3 days before, his massive frame bloodied and bruised, his long dark hair matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood, his hands bound with rope thick enough to tether a horse. The marshal and his 2 deputies had needed all their combined strength to wrestle him into the cell, though by the look of him he had not fought back. His face, what she could see of it beneath the grime and swelling, had been blank, resigned, like a man who had already accepted whatever fate awaited him. Bentonville, Arkansas was not a large town, and news traveled fast. By nightfall, everyone knew the story, or at least the version Marshal Harding told in the saloon. The mountain man, name of Marcus Grayson, had been found standing over the body of Clayton Mercer, one of the richest ranchers in the territory, with a bloody knife in his hand. Open and shut case, the marshal said. They would hold him for 30 days until the circuit judge arrived, and then they would hang him. Kendra had learned long ago not to trust everything Marshal Harding said. She had been in Bentonville for 2 years now, ever since her parents died of fever, and left her with nothing but a small house on the edge of town, and a garden she tended with her own 2 hands. She sold vegetables and baked goods to survive, and she kept her head down and her opinions to herself, because that was what single women did if they wanted to avoid trouble. But something about the mountain man bothered her. She had seen his face as they hauled him past her house, and there had been no guilt in his eyes, no fear, just a deep, exhausted sadness that made her chest ache. She told herself it was none of her business. She told herself to stay away. She made it 2 days before her conscience got the better of her. The jailhouse was a squat wooden building that smelled like tobacco and unwashed bodies. Deputy Reynolds sat at the front desk, his boots propped up, a dime novel in his hands. He looked up when she entered, his eyebrows rising. "Miss Jameson, this is a surprise." "Good evening, Deputy." She held up the covered pot she carried. "I brought soup for the prisoner." Reynolds frowned. "That is not really necessary, miss. We feed him, I am sure you do." She kept her voice pleasant, neutral. "But I had extra, and it seemed a shame to waste it. Christian charity and all that." The deputy looked uncertain. He glanced toward the back room where the cells were, then back at her. Finally he shrugged. "I suppose it would not hurt, but I will need to check it first. No weapons or tools." "Of course." He lifted the lid and peered at the beef and vegetable soup, stirring it with a dirty finger. Kendra bit her tongue. He nodded, satisfied. "Go on back, but do not get too close to the bars. He is a dangerous man." The back room was dim, lit by a single lantern hanging from a hook. There were 2 cells, but only one was occupied. The mountain man sat on the narrow cot, his back against the wall, his eyes closed. He was even larger than she remembered, his shoulders impossibly broad, his arms thick with muscle visible even beneath his torn shirt. His face was still swollen, one eye bruised purple, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, the straight nose, the high cheekbones. His hair fell past his shoulders, dark and tangled. She cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Grayson?" His eyes opened. They were gray, like storm clouds, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment he just stared, as if he could not quite believe she was real. "Who are you?" His voice was rough, deep, the voice of a man who did not speak often. "My name is Kendra Jameson. I brought you soup." He glanced at the pot in her hands, then back at her face. Why? It was a fair question. She stepped closer to the bars, though not close enough to touch them. "Because you look hungry. Because everyone deserves a decent meal. Because I do not know if you killed Clayton Mercer, but I do not think you did." Something flickered in those gray eyes. "You do not know me." "No," she agreed. "But I know Marshal Harding, and I know Clayton Mercer had a lot of enemies." Marcus Grayson pushed himself off the cot and moved toward the bars. Up close he was enormous, at least 6.5 feet tall, his body a wall of solid muscle. She should have been afraid, but she was not. He reached through the bars with one massive hand, palm up, and she carefully set the bowl of soup into it. Their fingers brushed, just for a second, and she felt the calluses on his skin, the warmth of his touch. "Thank you," he said quietly. She watched as he lifted the bowl to his lips and drank, closing his eyes as the hot liquid ran down his throat. When he lowered it, There was something like wonder on his battered face. "I have not had anything this good in longer than I can remember. There is more if you want it. I can bring some tomorrow. You do not have to do that." "I know," she met his eyes, "but I want to." She came back the next evening, and the evening after that. Sometimes Deputy Reynolds was on duty. Sometimes it was Deputy Clark, but they both let her through after a cursory check of whatever she brought. Soup, stew, fresh bread, apple pie. She brought more than any one man could eat, but Marcus never complained. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, and when he was finished he would hand the empty bowl back through the bars and thank her with that deep, rumbling voice that seemed to resonate in her bones. At first they did not talk much. She would ask him simple questions. How was he feeling? Did he need anything? And he would give short answers. But gradually, as the days passed, he began to open up. He told her about his life in the mountains, trapping and hunting, living alone with only his thoughts for company. He told her about finding Clayton Mercer on the trail, already dying, the knife wound in his side still bleeding. He had pulled the knife out trying to help, and that was when the marshal arrived. "I should have run," Marcus said on the 10th night, his hands wrapped around a bowl of chicken stew. "But I was tired of running, tired of being alone. Part of me thought maybe this was just how it was supposed to end. You cannot think like that." Kendra gripped the bars without thinking, her knuckles white. "You are innocent. The judge will see that. Maybe." He did not sound convinced. "Or maybe they just need someone to hang, and I am convenient. Then we will find proof. We will find out who really killed Mercer. We?" He looked at her with something between confusion and tenderness. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care what happens to me?" She did not have a good answer. Or rather, she had an answer she was not ready to admit, not even to herself. So she just said, "Because it is the right thing to do." But the truth was more complicated. The truth was that she looked forward to these evening visits more than anything else in her day. The truth was that when she cooked, she found herself thinking about what Marcus might like, what might bring a smile to his bruised face. The truth was that she dreamed about him, about those storm gray eyes and that deep voice, about what it might feel like to have those powerful arms wrapped around her. She told herself it was foolish. He was a prisoner, accused of murder, and even if he was innocent, he would likely leave Bentonville the moment he was free. Mountain men did not settle down in small towns. They did not court shopkeepers' daughters. They belonged to the wild places, the high peaks and deep forests where civilization could not reach them. But her heart did not seem to care about logic. On the 15th day, she brought him venison stew and sat on the floor outside his cell while he ate. It was late, past 9 o'clock, and Deputy Clark had already fallen asleep at his desk. The lantern light flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Tell me about your parents," Marcus said suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything. I want to know about you." So she told him about her father, a carpenter who could build anything with his hands, about her mother, who sang while she worked and made the best apple preserves in 3 counties, about the fever that took them both within a week of each other, leaving her alone and adrift in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. "I am sorry," Marcus said when she finished. His voice was soft, genuine. "Losing people you love is the hardest thing there is. You sound like you know something about it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My mother died when I was born. My father raised me alone, taught me everything about surviving in the mountains. He died 5 years ago. Hunting accident. Since then it has just been me. That must be lonely." It was. He looked at her through the bars, and there was something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "It is not so lonely anymore." Her breath caught. She wanted to reach through the bars, to touch his hand, to tell him that she felt it too, this impossible connection that had grown between them. But before she could find the words, they heard footsteps in the outer room. Deputy Clark was waking up. She gathered her things quickly, murmuring a hasty goodbye, and slipped out before anyone could question why she had stayed so long. That night she lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing. 20 days left until the judge arrived. 20 days to find proof of Marcus's innocence, or to accept that she might lose him forever. The next morning she went to the general store and struck up a conversation with Mrs. Patterson the biggest gossip in Bentonville. Within an hour, she had learned that Clayton Mercer owed money all over town, that his ranch was on the verge of bankruptcy, and that he had been involved in a bitter dispute with his business partner, a man named Richard Stokes, over the sale of some cattle. She went to the saloon that evening, something she had never done before, and ordered a sarsaparilla. She sat in the corner and listened to the men talk. She heard rumors about Mercer's gambling debts, about deals gone bad, about enemies in neighboring towns. She heard whispers that maybe the mountain man was not the killer after all, but nobody wanted to say it too loudly, not with Marshall Harding's friends listening. Over the next week, Kendra became a detective. She asked questions carefully, disguising her interest as idle curiosity. She visited Mercer's ranch on the pretense of selling vegetables and talked to the ranch hands. She learned that Richard Stokes had argued with Mercer the day before his death, that he had threatened to take everything Mercer owned. She brought this information to Marcus every evening, along with food. He listened carefully, his expression darkening as she laid out what she had discovered. "Richard Stokes," he said slowly. "I remember that name. Mercer said it before he died. He was trying to tell me something, but I could not make out the words. He was too far gone." "We need proof," Kendra said. "Something concrete that the judge cannot ignore. How are we going to get that with me locked in here?" "I will find a way." He reached through the bars and caught her hand. His palm was rough and warm, his fingers wrapping around hers with a gentleness that contradicted his size. "Kendra, you have already done too much. If this goes wrong, if you get caught snooping around, Stokes or Harding could hurt you. I cannot let you put yourself in danger for me. You cannot stop me." She squeezed his hand, meeting his eyes. "I am not going to let an innocent man hang, especially not you. Why especially me?" The question hung in the air between them. She could lie, could deflect, could pretend she did not understand what he was really asking. But she was tired of pretending. "Because you matter to me," she said softly. "Because these past 3 weeks have been the best 3 weeks I have had since my parents died. Because when I think about you not being in the world anymore, I cannot breathe." He stared at her, his gray eyes wide, and then he was pulling her closer, drawing her against the bars. She went willingly, pressing herself as close as the iron would allow. He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I have been alone for so long," he whispered. "I forgot what it felt like to want something besides survival. But then you walked in here with your soup and your kindness and your courage, and everything changed. Kendra, I do not know what is going to happen when the judge comes, but I need you to know that these last 3 weeks have meant everything to me. You have given me something to fight for." She turned her face into his palm, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. "Then we fight together." The next day, while Deputy Reynolds was distracted with a drunk cowboy who had started a fight at the saloon, Kendra slipped around back to the small window of Marcus's cell. She had brought a basket of food, but hidden beneath the cloth napkin was a knife, small but sharp. "No," Marcus said immediately when he saw it. "Absolutely not. You could cut through the bars, escape, and prove everyone right about me, and make you an accomplice to a jailbreak." He shook his head firmly. "I will not do that to you, Kendra. We do this the right way, or we do not do it at all." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. So she took the knife back and focused on the only other option, finding real proof of Richard Stokes's guilt. She spent the next 2 days watching Stokes's house, a large farmstead on the north edge of town. She saw him leave on the morning of the 24th day, riding toward the mountains with a rifle and a pack. She waited until he was out of sight, then approached the house. His wife answered the door, a thin woman with tired eyes. "Can I help you?" "I am selling preserves," Kendra said, holding up a jar. "I wondered if you might be interested." The woman invited her in, grateful for the company. As they talked, Kendra's eyes roamed the room, searching for anything that might help Marcus, and then she saw it, on the desk in the corner, a ledger book lying open. She excused herself to use the outhouse, and on her way back she glanced at the ledger. The entries were damning. Payments to Mercer, marked as loans, with interest rates that would have bankrupted any man. And at the bottom of the page, a note in Stokes's handwriting: "If he does not pay by August 1st, I will take care of it, self." Mercer had died on August 2nd. Kendra's heart raced. She needed that ledger, but she could not just steal it. She needed a witness, someone who could confirm what it said. She thanked Mrs. Stokes for her time and hurried into town, straight to the office of Judge Warren, who had arrived that morning, 2 days early. Judge Warren was a stern man with white whiskers and sharp eyes. He listened to Kendra's story with growing interest, and when she mentioned the ledger, he stood up immediately. "Take me there," he said, "now." They rode to the Stokes farm together, the judge bringing Marshall Harding along despite Kendra's objections. Mrs. Stokes looked frightened when she saw them, but she let them in. The judge examined the ledger carefully, his expression growing darker with each page. "Where is your husband, Mrs. Stokes?" "He went hunting. He will be back tomorrow. When he returns, tell him to report to my office immediately. He has some questions to answer." That evening, Kendra practically ran to the jailhouse. Deputy Clark let her through without comment, and she found Marcus pacing his cell like a caged wolf. "The judge saw the ledger," she said breathlessly. "He knows about the debt, about Stokes's threat. He is going to question him tomorrow." Marcus gripped the bars, hope and fear warring on his face. "Does this mean it means we have a chance, a real chance?" He reached through and pulled her close, his forehead pressing against the bars, his breath warm on her face. "Kendra Jameson, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. I am just stubborn. You are brave and kind and smart, and if I get out of here, the first thing I am going to do is find you and tell you properly how I feel. You do not have to wait." She rose on her toes, stretching up, and pressed her lips to his through the bars. It was an awkward kiss, metal between them, but it was also the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. His lips were warm and soft, and when he kissed her back, it was with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling for the first time since she had met him. 30 days, he said softly. "For 30 days you have been keeping me alive, keeping me sane, keeping me hoping. I am not going to forget that, Kendra. No matter what happens tomorrow." "Nothing bad is going to happen tomorrow," she said fiercely. "I will not allow it." The next morning, Richard Stokes returned to town and was immediately arrested. He denied everything at first, but when confronted with the ledger and the testimony of 3 ranch hands who had seen him arguing with Mercer, he broke down and confessed. He had gone to collect his money, they had fought, and he had stabbed Mercer in a fit of rage. When he saw Marcus approaching on the trail, he had panicked and fled, leaving the mountain man to take the blame. Judge Warren convened an emergency hearing that afternoon. Marcus was brought from his cell, blinking in the bright sunlight like a man emerging from a cave. Kendra sat in the front row of the small courtroom, her hands clenched in her lap, barely breathing as the judge reviewed the evidence. "Marcus Grayson," the judge said finally, "it is the finding of this court that you are innocent of all charges in the death of Clayton Mercer. You are free to go." The deputy unlocked Marcus's shackles, and he stood there for a moment, rubbing his wrists, looking dazed. Then his eyes found Kendra's, and he moved. He crossed the courtroom in 3 long strides and swept her up into his arms, lifting her off her feet as if she weighed nothing. She wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing, crying at the time, and he buried his face in her hair. "I have got you," he murmured. "I have got you." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and whispers, but Kendra did not care. She clung to Marcus, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. And for the first time in 30 days, she let herself believe that everything was going to be all right. When he finally set her down, he kept one arm around her waist as if he was afraid to let her go. Judge Warren cleared his throat. "Mr. Grayson, you are owed an apology from this town, and from Marshall Harding in particular. I understand that is poor compensation for what you have endured, but I hope you will accept it nonetheless." Marcus looked at the judge, then at Harding, who had the decency to look ashamed. "I will accept it," he said slowly, "but only because someone in this town showed me that not everyone is quick to judge. Someone showed me kindness when I had given up hope. That is worth more than any apology." He looked down at Kendra as he said it, and she felt her cheeks flush with warmth. They walked out of the courtroom together, into the late afternoon sunlight. Bentonville's Main Street stretched before them, dusty and familiar, but somehow it looked different now, brighter, full of possibility. "What are you going to do now?" Kendra asked. "Are you going back to the mountains?" Marcus stopped walking. He turned to face her, his hand settling on her shoulders. That depends. On what? On whether you want me to stay. Her heart felt like it might burst. Of course I want you to stay. But Marcus, you are a mountain man. You do not belong in a town. You will be miserable here. I was miserable in the mountains, he said quietly. I just did not realize it until I met you, Kendra. I have been alone for so long that I forgot what it was like to have someone to come home to. I forgot what it was like to care about something besides the next hunt, the next trap, the next winter. You reminded me that there is more to life than just surviving. You made me want to live again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I want you to live too. I want you to stay. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are here, that you are safe, that you are mine. Then I am yours. He cupped her face in his hands, those big scarred hands that were so gentle with her. If you will have me, Kendra Jameson, I am yours for as long as you want me. Forever, she whispered. I want you forever. He kissed her then, right there in the middle of Main Street with half the town watching. It was nothing like the awkward kiss through the bars. This was fierce and hungry and full of 30 days of longing finally unleashed. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet again, and she melted into him, into the safety and strength and rightness of being held by him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, someone in the crowd whistled. Marcus grinned, that rare, beautiful grin that transformed his whole face and set her down gently. I should probably find somewhere to stay, he said, and a job. I have trapping skills and I can hunt, but I do not know if there is much call for that in town. You could work at the lumber mill, Kendra suggested. They are always looking for strong men, and you could stay. She hesitated, suddenly shy. You could stay with me. I have a small house, but it has 2 rooms. You could have the back room until we figure things out. Are you sure? People will talk. Let them talk. I fed you soup through prison bars for 30 days. I think we are past worrying about propriety. He laughed, a deep rumbling sound that she felt in her chest. All right then, show me this house of yours. They walked through town together, and Kendra was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Marcus walked close beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a gentle, possessive touch that made her feel protected and cherished. She had never had that before, never had someone who looked at her the way he did, as if she was the most precious thing in the world. Her house was small and simple, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but she had made it cozy with curtains she had sewn herself and wildflowers in mason. Jars on the table. Marcus had to duck to get through the doorway, and once inside he seemed to fill the whole space with his presence. It is perfect, he said, looking around, just like you. She showed him the back room, which held only a narrow bed and a dresser. It is not much. It is more than I have had in years. He set his hat on the dresser, then turned to face her. Kendra, I need you to understand something. I have nothing to offer you except myself. No money, no land, no fancy things. I am just a mountain man with rough hands and a past full of loneliness. But I swear to you, if you let me stay, I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will work hard, I will protect you, and I will love you with everything I have. That is all I want, she said softly. I do not need money or land or fancy things. I just need you. He crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. This time when he kissed her, it was slow and deep and full of promise. She felt the tension drain out of him, felt him relax into the kiss, as if he was finally allowing himself to believe this was real. When they parted, she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. You need a bath, she said, wrinkling her nose. No offense, but 30 days in that cell did not do you any favors, he chuckled. None taken. I probably smell like a bear, worse than a bear. She pulled back and looked up at him. I will heat some water. There is a tub out back. She spent the next hour hauling water and heating it over the stove, and when the tub was finally full, Marcus stripped off his filthy shirt. Kendra tried not to stare, but it was impossible. His body was magnificent, all hard muscle and bronzed skin, with a few scars that spoke of a hard life in the wilderness. He caught her looking and grinned. Like what you see? She blushed furiously. I will be inside if you need anything. She retreated to the kitchen, her face burning, and tried to busy herself with preparing dinner. But her mind kept wandering to the man in her backyard, to the feel of his lips on hers, to the promise in his words. She was falling in love with him, had probably been falling since the first time she saw vulnerability in his eyes. It was reckless and impractical and completely wonderful. When Marcus came back inside, he was clean and damp, his long hair slicked back from his face. He had put on a spare shirt she had found, one that had belonged to her father. It was too small, straining across his shoulders, but it was clean. "That is much better," she said approvingly. They ate dinner together at her small table, and it felt strangely domestic, as if they had been doing this for years instead of hours. Marcus told her more about his life in the mountains, about the beauty of the high places and the harshness of winter, about the animals he had hunted and the long, silent nights under the stars. She told him about her parents, about her garden, about the quiet loneliness of the past 2 years. "You will not be lonely anymore," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I promise you that." That night, Marcus slept in the back room, and Kendra lay awake in her own bed, acutely aware that only a thin wall separated them. He could hear him moving around, the creak of the bed as he settled in, and she wondered if he was having as much trouble sleeping as she was. The next morning, Marcus went to the lumber mill and came back with a job. The foreman had been skeptical at first, but after watching Marcus lift a log that normally took 3 men, he had hired him on the spot. Marcus threw himself into the work with the same intensity he brought to everything, and within a week he had earned the respect of every man at the mill. Kendra continued her garden and her baking, but now she had someone to cook for, someone to care for, and it made all the difference. Every evening Marcus would come home dusty and tired, and she would have dinner waiting. They would eat together and talk for hours, learning everything about each other, building something real and solid and lasting. The town slowly adjusted to the idea of them together. Some people still whispered, still looked at Marcus with suspicion, but most came around when they saw how gentle he was with Kendra, how hard he worked, how he tipped his hat to the ladies and helped old Mrs. Patterson carry her groceries. 6 weeks after his release, Marcus showed up at the house in the middle of the day. Kendra was in the garden, pulling weeds, and she looked up in surprise when she heard his footsteps. "What are you doing home so early?" He stood there in the sunlight, this massive, beautiful man with sawdust in his hair and nervousness in his eyes, and held out his hand. In his palm was a small gold ring, simple and unadorned. "It is not much," he said, his voice rough, "but it is all I could afford. Kendra Jameson, I know we have not known each other long. I know some people think we are moving too fast, but I have been alone for most of my life, and I do not want to be alone anymore. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to grow old with you. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" She looked at the ring, then at his face, at the hope and fear and love shining in his gray eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Marcus, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then lifted her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her with a joy and passion that made her dizzy. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church on the edge of town. Judge Warren officiated, and half of Bentonville turned out to watch. Kendra wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair, and Marcus wore a new suit that he had bought with his mill wages. He looked uncomfortable in it, tugging at the collar, but when he saw her walking down the aisle, his face transformed with such pure adoration that she nearly cried. "I, Marcus Grayson, take you, Kendra Jameson, to be my wife," he said, his voice steady and strong. "I promise to love you, to cherish you, to protect you, and to honor you for all the days of my life." "I, Kendra Jameson, take you, Marcus Grayson, to be my husband," she echoed. "I promise to love you, to support you, to stand by you, and to be your partner in all things for all the days of my life." When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with such tenderness that the whole church sighed. They walked out together into the autumn sunshine, hand in hand, husband and wife, and Kendra felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The townspeople threw rice and cheered, and someone started playing a fiddle. There was dancing in the street and food and laughter, and for a few hours Bentonville forgot its troubles and celebrated the unlikely love story of the mountain man and the woman who had saved him. That night, in the privacy of their home, Marcus carried Kendra over the threshold. He set her down gently in the middle of the front room, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at each other, the weight of what they had just done settling over them. "I love you," he said softly. "I do not say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," she whispered. "From the moment I saw you behind those bars, something in me knew. I knew you were important. I knew you were mine." He kissed her then, slowly and thoroughly, and she melted into him, into the warmth and strength of him. He lifted her into his arms and carried her to their bedroom, the room that had been hers alone but was now theirs to share, and he laid her down on the bed with a gentleness that belied his size. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hand cupping her face. "We can wait if you are not ready." "I am sure," she said, reaching up to pull him down to her. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." They came together with a sweetness and passion that left them both breathless. Marcus was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience, and Kendra gave herself to him completely, without reservation or fear. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her, and she felt a peace she had never known before. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For what?" "For seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me a reason to live." She tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. "You gave me a reason too. I was just existing before you came along. Now I am living." They built a life together, day by day, moment by moment. Marcus continued to work at the mill, and his wages grew as his skill and reliability became known. Kendra expanded her garden and started selling more baked goods, and together they saved every penny they could. A year after their wedding, they bought a small piece of land just outside of town. It was nothing fancy, just 10 acres with a creek running through it and a view of the mountains in the distance. But to Marcus, who had spent so many years wandering, it was paradise. "We could build a house here," he said, standing on the property with his arm around Kendra's waist. "A real house big enough for a family. We could have chickens and maybe a cow. I could still work at the mill, but we would have our own place, our own land." "It sounds perfect," Kendra said, leaning into him. They spent the next 6 months building. Marcus did most of the work himself, his experience living in the mountains giving him skills that most town dwellers lacked. He felled trees and hewed logs, built a sturdy frame and a solid roof. Kendra helped where she could, and on weekends their friends from town would come out to lend a hand. Even Marshall Harding showed up one Saturday with a wagon full of nails and an apology that Marcus graciously accepted. By the spring of 1878, the house was finished. It was not large, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and filled with their love. They moved in on a sunny April day, carrying their few possessions across the threshold, and that night they made love in their new bed with the windows open and the sound of the creek murmuring in the background. "Do you ever miss the mountains?" Kendra asked later as they lay wrapped in each other's arms. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I miss the silence, the solitude, but I do not miss the loneliness, and I would rather be here with you, in this house we built together, than anywhere else in the world." That summer, Kendra discovered she was pregnant. She told Marcus one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, his eyes wide, and then he let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around. "Careful," she laughed. "I am fragile now. You are the strongest person I know," he said, setting her down gently. "But I will be careful, I promise." He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I want you to know that you are already the most loved child in the world." Kendra ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. She had not known it was possible to be this happy. The pregnancy was not easy. Kendra was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. Marcus waited on her hand and foot, making her ginger tea and holding her hair when she was ill. As her belly grew, he became even more protective, insisting she rest, doing all the heavy work around the house and garden. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she would protest, but secretly she loved how much he cared. In the late winter of 1879, on a snowy February night, Kendra went into labor. Marcus rode into town through the blizzard to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Patterson's daughter, and then paced the house like a caged animal while Kendra labored in their bedroom. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Marcus thought he might go mad with worry. But finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, he heard a thin wail, and Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom with a smile. "You have a son, Mr. Grayson, a healthy boy." Marcus burst into the room to find Kendra propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, with a tiny bundle in her arms. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the child they had made together. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "Do you want to hold him?" Kendra asked. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. He took the baby carefully, cradling him against his broad chest, and the infant settled immediately, as if he knew he was safe. Marcus looked down at his son, at the small fists and the downy dark hair, and felt something crack open in his chest. This was what he had been missing all those years in the mountains. This connection, this love, this sense of belonging to something bigger than himself. "What should we name him?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I was thinking we could call him Matthew," Kendra said, "after my father, Matthew Grayson." "Matthew," Marcus repeated, trying it out. "I like it." "Matthew Grayson, welcome to the world, son!" The baby yawned, and Marcus laughed, a sound of pure joy. He sat down on the edge of the bed, still holding Matthew, and leaned over to kiss Kendra's forehead. "You are amazing," he told her. "You are the most amazing woman in the world, and I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "We found each other." They fell into the rhythms of parenthood, the late nights and early mornings, the feedings and diaper changes, the exhaustion and the overwhelming love. Marcus was a natural father, patient and gentle despite his size. He would walk Matthew for hours when the baby was fussy, singing old mountain songs in his deep voice until Matthew fell asleep against his shoulder. As Matthew grew from infant to toddler, Marcus taught him about the world. He took him on walks through the woods, showing him animal tracks and edible plants. He carved him toys from wood, horses and bears and little figures that Matthew clutched in his chubby fists. And every night, he would sit on the edge of Matthew's bed and tell him stories about the mountains and the wilderness and the beautiful fifth woman who had saved his father's life. 2 years after Matthew was born, Kendra gave birth to a daughter. They named her Catherine, after Kendra's mother. Catherine had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the moment she was born, she was fearless, reaching for everything, afraid of nothing. Marcus doted on her shamelessly, carrying her everywhere on his shoulders, letting her tug his beard and pull his hair. "You are spoiling her," Kendra would say, but she was smiling. "She is my little girl," Marcus would reply. "I am allowed to spoil her." Life was good, better than good. Their land prospered, their children thrived, and their love deepened with every passing year. Marcus still worked at the mill, but they also raised chickens and pigs, and Marcus taught Matthew and Catherine how to fish in the creek. Kendra's garden flourished, and she became known throughout the county for her vegetables and preserves. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Marcus and Kendra would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. He would hold her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, and they would talk about everything and nothing, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. "Do you ever think about that night I first came to the jail?" Kendra asked one evening. "All the time," Marcus said. "I think about how different my life would be if you had not had the courage to walk through that door. I would probably be dead, or still wandering the mountains alone, half alive but not really living." "I think about it too," she said. "I was so scared, but I knew I had to do something. I could not just let you waste away in that cell. You saved my life." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You gave me everything. A home, a family, a reason to wake up in the morning. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God for you every single day. You deserve everything good, Marcus. You are the best man I know." He pulled her close, tucking her against his side, and they sat like that as the stars came out one by one, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The years passed. Matthew grew into a strong boy who idolized his father and followed him everywhere. Catherine became a whirlwind of energy, always climbing trees and chasing chickens and getting into mischief. Marcus built an addition onto the house to give the children their own rooms, and Kendra taught them to read and write and do their sums. In the spring of 1885, when Matthew was 6 and Catherine was 4, Kendra discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in December she gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Michael and Mark. Marcus was beside himself with joy, strutting around like a rooster, showing off his sons to anyone who would listen. 4 children, Kendra said, exhausted but happy as she nursed the twins. We have 4 children. Marcus. Best thing I ever did, he said, watching her with such love in his eyes that it made her chest ache. Well, second best. The first best thing was marrying you. Their house was loud and chaotic and full of love. Matthew helped his father in the workshop Marcus had built, learning to carve wood and repair tools. Catherine helped her mother in the garden and the kitchen, though she was more interested in catching frogs than in baking. The twins were inseparable, always toddling after their older siblings, getting into everything. Through it all, Marcus and Kendra remained each other's anchor. They still made time for each other, stealing kisses in the kitchen, holding hands under the table at dinner, slipping away for walks by the creek when the children were occupied. Their love had not dimmed with time or familiarity. If anything, it had grown stronger, deepened by shared experiences and the life they had built together. One evening, when Marcus was 42 and Kendra was 38, they were sitting on the porch after the children had gone to bed. It was a warm summer night, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle, and the fireflies were dancing in the darkness. "Do you remember the soup?" Marcus asked suddenly. Kendra laughed. "Of course I remember the soup. Beef and vegetable, with carrots and potatoes. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. But it was not really about the soup, was it? It was about the fact that someone cared enough to bring it to me. Someone saw me as a human being, not just a prisoner or a killer or a problem to be solved." "You were never any of those things to me," Kendra said softly. "From the moment I saw you, I saw a good man who was being treated unjustly. I saw someone who needed help, and I knew I had to do something. You did more than something, you gave me everything." He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Dance with me. There is no music. We do not need music." So they danced there on the porch, swaying gently to a rhythm only they could hear, holding each other close. Kendra rested her head on Marcus's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, more than words can say. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. Matthew grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's kind heart. He apprenticed at the mill and eventually took over Marcus's old job when Marcus decided to focus on farming their land full-time. Catherine became a teacher, opening a small schoolhouse in Bentonville, fierce and independent and beloved by her students. The twins, Michael and Mark, remained inseparable, working the farm together and eventually building their own house on the far end of the property when they, twin sisters from a neighboring town. Through it all, Marcus and Kendra grew old together. Marcus's dark hair turned silver, and lines etched themselves into his face, but he was still strong, still protective, still the man who had stolen her heart 30 years before. Kendra's hair went gray, and her hands grew gnarled with arthritis, but she was still the same woman who had faced down a corrupt marshal and saved an innocent man's life. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Matthew had 3 children of his own now, Catherine had 2, and the twins had 5 between them. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, and as Marcus looked around at the family they had created, he felt a peace so profound it brought tears to his eyes. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Marcus and Kendra sat on their porch one last time, just the 2 of them, watching the stars. 30 years, Kendra said, shaking her head in wonder. "It feels like a lifetime and like no time at all. Best 30 years of my life," Marcus said. He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, just as they had so many times before. "I was lost before I met you. I was just wandering, existing, waiting for something to end me. And then you walked into that jail with your soup and your kindness, and everything changed. You gave me a reason to fight, a reason to hope, a reason to live." "You did the same for me," Kendra said, squeezing his hand. "I was so lonely before you. I was just going through the motions, day after day, with no real purpose. And then you came along, and suddenly everything had meaning, everything had color." "We were lucky," Marcus said, "lucky to find each other, Lucky to have this life, this family. Not everyone gets that. No, Kendra agreed. Not everyone does, but we did, and I would not change a single moment of it, even the hard parts. Because it all led us here to this porch, with our children and grandchildren sleeping safe in their beds. That is everything I ever wanted. Marcus pulled her close, and she settled against him the way she had 1,000 times before, perfectly content. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just being together, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and had chosen, every day, to stay together. "Do you think they will remember us?" Kendra asked eventually. "The grandchildren? Do you think they will know our story?" "Matthew will tell them," Marcus said confidently, "and Catherine will tell them. And the twins will tell them. They will know that their grandfather was a mountain man who was falsely accused, and their grandmother was the brave woman who saved him. They will know that we loved each other more than anything in the world. They will know that against all odds, we found each other and built something beautiful." "Good," Kendra said, smiling. "That is all I need." They continued to sit on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead, and the night deepened around them. In the distance, an owl hooted, and the creek murmured its eternal song. The world was vast and wild and unpredictable, but here, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Marcus Grayson, once a lonely mountain man facing the hangman's noose, now had everything a man could want. He had a wife who loved him, children who respected him, grandchildren who adored him, and a home that was filled with laughter and warmth. He had gone from having nothing to having everything, and it all started with a woman and a bowl of soup. Kendra Jameson Grayson, once a lonely orphan just surviving day to day, now had everything a woman could want. She had a husband who cherished her, children who made her proud, grandchildren who brought her joy, and a life that was rich with meaning and purpose. She had gone from existing to truly living, and it all started when she walked through the door of a jailhouse and offered kindness to a stranger. They had both been saved that day, not just Marcus from the hangman, but both of them from lives of loneliness and despair. They had found each other when they needed it most, and they had chosen every day for 30 years to continue choosing each other. As the night grew late and the stars began to fade, Marcus and Kendra finally rose from the porch and went inside, walking hand in hand to the bedroom they had shared for 3 decades. They climbed into bed together, and Marcus pulled Kendra close, her back against his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. "Good night, my love," he whispered into her hair. "Good night, my heart," she whispered back, and they fell asleep together, as they had every night for 30 years, two people who had found salvation in each other and had built a life more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to dream. The soup had been just the beginning. It had been an act of kindness, a gesture of humanity, a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. But it had become so much more. It had become the foundation of a love story that would be passed down through generations, a testament to the power of compassion and courage, and the unshakable belief that good people deserve good things. Marcus and Kendra lived many more years after that 30th anniversary, growing old together with grace and gratitude. They saw more grandchildren born, celebrated more weddings and birthdays and holidays. They continued to sit on their porch every evening, holding hands and watching the sunset, never taking for granted the miracle of having found each other. When Marcus finally passed away at the age of 73, Kendra held his hand and whispered that she loved him, that she would see him again, that he had given her the most beautiful life she could have imagined. And Marcus, with his last breath, whispered back that she had been his salvation, his everything, and that loving her had been the greatest adventure of his life. Kendra lived another 5 years after Marcus died, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of whom carried pieces of the love story that had started with soup through prison bars. She told the story often to anyone who would listen, making sure that no one would forget how she had met the love of her life, how she had saved him, how he had saved her right back. When Kendra finally joined Marcus in whatever lay beyond, she was buried beside him on a hill overlooking their land, with a simple gravestone that read, "Marcus and Kendra Grayson, together forever, love conquers all." Their children and grandchildren continued to live on the land they had built, tending the fields and the animals, raising their own families, passing down the story of the mountain man and the woman who fed him soup, who fell in love against all odds, who proved that kindness and courage and love are the most powerful forces in the world. And on summer evenings, when the fireflies danced and the creek murmured and the stars came out one by one, the family would gather on the porch of the old house that Marcus built, and they would tell the story again. They would talk about the bowl of soup that changed 2 lives, about the 30 days that turned into 30 years, about the love that grew from the darkest circumstances and bloomed into something beautiful and eternal. It was a story worth telling, a story worth remembering, a story that reminded everyone who heard it that hope is never lost, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Marcus and Kendra had been 2 lonely souls, adrift in a harsh world, until they found each other. And once they did, they held on tight and never let go, building a life and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their story became legend in Bentonville and the surrounding counties, a tale that parents told their children, that grandparents told their grandchildren, about the power of love and the importance of standing up for what is right. The old jailhouse where Marcus had been imprisoned was eventually torn down, but people remembered what had happened there, remembered the woman who had refused to let an innocent man be forgotten, who had brought him soup and hope and eventually love. In the end, Marcus and Kendra Grayson's story was not just about them. It was about the redemptive power of human connection, about the way one person's kindness can change the course of another person's life, about the courage it takes to love and be loved in return. It was about second chances and new beginnings, about finding home in another person, about building something lasting and true in a world that often feels temporary and uncertain. It was a story that deserved to be told, deserved to be remembered, deserved to live on long after its protagonists had gone. And it did live on, in the hearts and minds of everyone who heard it, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love can light the way. Even when all seems lost, hope can be found. Even when we are at our lowest, someone might come along with a bowl of soup and change everything. Marcus Grayson had been saved from the gallows, but more importantly, he had been saved from a life of loneliness and despair. Kendra Jameson had saved herself from the same fate. Together, they had created something magical, something that transcended their individual lives and became part of the fabric of their community, their family, their legacy. And it all started with soup through prison bars, with one woman's courage and one man's gratitude, with 30 days that led to a lifetime, with a love that proved stronger than fear, stronger than injustice, stronger than anything the world could throw at them. It was a love for the ages, a love worth celebrating, a love that would never be forgotten. Marcus and Kendra Grayson had lived, truly lived, and their love story would echo through the generations, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost or alone or afraid. They had found each other when they needed it most, and they had held on tight, and in doing so, they had created something beautiful and eternal. That was their gift to the world, their legacy, their happily ever after, and it was everything.